Oh, good. Okay, that worked. Okay, so we will call to order this special meeting of the Easton Reading Region 9 Joint Board of Education Policy Committee. First item is the approval of minutes from the May 14th, 2021. And actually, let's do those separately. May 14th, 2021 meeting. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Maureen.
Second.
Thank you, Chris, for the second. Any discussion? All in favor? Passes 3-0. Thank you. And now the May 21st, 2021 Easton Reading Region 9 Boards of Education Policy Committee regular meeting minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Chris.
So moved.
Thank you, Maureen. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? I see Chris, Maureen, and I vote yes. This also passes 3-0. That takes us to public comment. No members of the public being present. We'll go to committee member comment. Hearing none, we'll go to discussion and possible action. So we have 3 items on the agenda today. So our regular CAPE model policy review, administrative updates, and the Easton Reading Region 9 joint governance recommendations. We had them add the Easton Reading Region 9 joint governance recommendations. We oftentimes talk about that as a part of the CAPE model policy review in the 9000 series. 9000 series, yes. Where we touch on bylaws and things like that. It's very much under that heading, but just wanted to make it really clear so that there's no confusion about that topic as we endeavor to do. I don't think we have any regular CAPE model policy review content to dig into, but Dr. Pearson-Ugal, do you have any administrative updates or items that are important for us to talk about?
Nothing that's urgent.
Okay, thank you. I will then move us to the Easton Reading Region 9 joint governance recommendations. And for that, I will share my screen on the document that we've used to facilitate these conversations over the course of the last several weeks. Okay, so just a quick summary. So I think we have 27 items listed here, various topics under the headings of meeting governance, joint committee governance, matters impacting central office and personnel, and resolution of issues. We are suggesting sample language, which we'd like to put in front of each of the 3 boards when we meet together jointly in the not too distant future, to try to come to an agreement on what the recommendation, at a minimum, what the guidance is, and maybe in stronger terms, how we want to enshrine this as the sort of best practices of the boards when we meet together to get work done. So we have selecting a chair, setting an agenda, recording minutes, et cetera. And I think most of these are fairly uncontroversial items. As we go down to some of the more complex issues, for instance, hiring of senior central office personnel, we've sort of started to provide some sample language and anticipate that there may be a fair amount of discussion on these topics when we dig into it. So whereas something like setting a regular meeting schedule may not be sort of complex or controversial, we may find that there's a lot of discussion necessary for us to sort of gain some kind of shared understanding when it comes to what the hiring of senior central office personnel is, or the approval of salary and benefits. Now, it's worth mentioning that separate from the policy committee, the joint negotiating committee has done some work to outline a process as it relates to the hiring of senior central office personnel. And it appears that process is working in terms of, so we're currently in the midst of a search for a person to fill the role of director of digital learning, and apologies if I'm not, and technology.
Director of
technology and digital learning. Yes, I think you just said
That's
it.
exactly what I meant. Yes, that's what I said. Yeah. And also, I think Barlow is in the midst of a process, and I think the Region 9 board has been sort of roughly referring to that process, because it not only suggests sort of here are the things that should be done, but helps to give a sense of like, hey, this should take this amount of time, and sort of just kind of acts as a standard operating procedures to make sure that the work of that, which can be very detailed, that things don't get lost. Maureen, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, or
In terms of, I'm
just in terms of just sort of the process and the hiring of sort of a new leader at Barlow.
Well, that process seems a little bit one step forward and one step back at the moment.
But is
And
it because of the process?
it is not because of the process. It is absolutely not because of the process.
It's because it's hard to do, I bet.
It's because it's hard to do. It's also because everyone is a little bit, we've done a few searches this year.
Yeah.
And we also want to be thoughtful
Yeah.
about making sure that each one is as thorough and comprehensive as the last.
Yeah.
And I think we all have to refocus on that.
Yeah, well,
That's what I'll say. It is not a process problem.
I will say for the Easton board, and actually, same to Chris from the Reading board side, we would be very welcoming of any advice, any sort of current stumbling blocks as we go to bring on a new leader at Helen Keller Middle School. I think next Wednesday we're doing a reveal of the profile. The work that we've done via various focus groups, and we're really looking forward to that. And then we will be reviewing, various applications, and and really getting down to business there. So, all right. So I think just a recap here for the hiring of senior central office personnel, and I wouldn't think of starting without zooming in first, of course. All matters regarding the hiring of senior central office personnel shall be discussed within a joint meeting of the three boards. In the event of a vacancy among senior central office personnel, the superintendent shall notify the board chairs, and a joint meeting of the board shall be convened to determine the appropriate hiring process. And then we refer to the sort of the process that we've previously articulated through the joint negotiating committee. Do we think this needs any additional sides or garnishes?
You want to restate that process here? I would.
What I was wondering here is similar to Maureen's question, which is, do we want to have it be the expectation that the negotiating committee sort of puts a little bit more formality around what has been a working draft? And maybe the answer is that as Easton and Region 9 and the three boards work through a simultaneous hiring processes, we're sort of testing this draft in action. And when we get to the other side of it, maybe that's an opportune time for the negotiating committee to say, here's what we would tweak. This is our recommendation. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And then we can incorporate that into this work at that point.
Maybe that's the time frame for that.
I think that makes perfect sense. I like that a lot. Okay. Okay. So going to the approval of salary and benefits for senior central office personnel, is our opening statement essentially the same? Or are we referring it to the joint negotiating committee?
I mean, when you say approval, you're talking about the three
boards, right?
I think you can say that the joint negotiating committee shall recommend appropriate salary and benefits to the joint boards, who shall take joint action.
Joint negotiating committee shall recommend to the boards. I mean, don't we need the joint negotiating committee will meet to to discuss and negotiate.
Yes.
Proposed terms, which will then be presented to boards for. Is that what we're saying?
Do you want a little bit more of a complete delegation of responsibilities to the joint negotiating committee within this language? And I don't know the answer. It may be yes, it may be no, but for clarity's sake, I think you want clear what's delegated.
Right.
And I think you also have to be, this is where there's that kind of flexible understanding between board members as to the degree of delegation that is ever permissible and the extent to which the committee is always making the recommendation.
Right.
And so I want to be careful in wording this so as not to sort of throw up red flags for folks who would think that this is an over delegation.
Yep.
And that the boards are there just to rubber stamp it.
Right.
Now, I am of the mind that the boards generally should exercise a certain degree of deference to the committees that have done the work and only sort of reject their recommendation for some level of cause. But that's not a fully shared view, I don't believe.
Well, you want joint negotiating committees and the committees and the people who do the work to really feel like their opinion is slightly more meritorious
Right.
than the people who didn't do the work.
Right.
I was there in the trench and I can tell you what was down there.
Right.
Right.
So
The joint negotiating committee.
Or maybe has more weight. That maybe what you say is the joint negotiating committee's recommendation shall be given due and appropriate weight or something along those
Or
lines.
deference.
Deference. Deference goes a little further when we get into our wordsmithing thing
Yeah.
and due an appropriate weight, but I could buy into deference. I don't know. I think that may be the word of the red flag.
So with the current wording, am I to understand that each board would need to confirm and accept the terms before the terms are presenting to those in what are we being called? Senior central office personnel before negotiation can occur?
No, I would not think that that's the case.
Right.
Okay. So I just want to be sure that that's totally clear, because
But
then
I
this week's calendar, that would be
Right.
not possible.
that is helpful. And maybe we should say the negotiating committee is tasked with reaching a tentative agreement with those negotiators, with those central office staff, subject to ratification by the boards.
Because
Yes.
otherwise you're going to be calling joint meetings every
Right.
other day.
Meaning to discuss.
We already do, Stefan.
Why should we do anything else?
You
Why
don't
stop?
want more meetings, Stephanie?
Crazy.
2
man.
a.m. 2 a.m. Was that a record for the board, by the way? I wanted to know.
Are we
Well,
counting
my
union?
time, it's a
Are we
record.
counting union negotiations?
I have a memory of a 1 a.m. meeting and a just past midnight meeting, but never 2:30.
Noted.
We had a 3:30 for union negotiation.
Oh, right.
But that wasn't a public
Right.
meeting.
Right.
It's not
That
Live on
makes it
Zoom
better.
from your living room. That's
25 people who are.
and the crazy thing is, if you missed the meeting and wanted to catch up on it by watching it in 2x speed, it would still take you 3 hours.
Right. Senior central office personnel. Nope.
2 N's, 1 L.
Yep. Joint negotiating committee is tasked with meeting to discuss, negotiate, and arrive at a tentative agreement with senior central.
With
The
respect to compensation and benefits, or with respect to terms of employment.
to terms of employment.
Because I believe that's also almost right out of the charge of the negotiating committee,
Right. Yeah, that's good.
which we might want to actually pattern that language.
Um,
I can work on pulling it up while you're.
yes, please. The recommendation of the in one of those weeks.
Oh, boy. Shall be given due and appropriate deference. What language do you want to use here?
Yeah. Shall be. I don't want to overstate it because
I don't either. So
yeah.
I'm open, but
joint negotiations shall be considered. Shall be blah 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 considered.
Why don't I read the charge, because I think it actually hits on some of this stuff.
Cool.
The Eastern Reading Region 9 Boards of Education shall establish a joint negotiations committee to consist of one member from each blah 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 blah. The committee shall be a standing committee charged with negotiating the terms of employment for central office administrators, including but not limited to annual compensation adjustments. The committee shall meet no less than annually and make recommendations for employment contracts, compensation, and benefits for such central office administrators to the three boards, and also be directed to prepare and maintain a documented process for the selection and hiring of central office administrators to be ratified by the three boards for use in future processes.
Well, that's something we are changing a little bit, I think, then. The last language is they shall be charged with coming up with a process. And here we are coming up with a process.
That's for hiring.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
for hiring.
That's what they've been doing.
Yeah. Yep.
All right.
Given due consideration.
I think that works.
Yeah.
What am I thinking? Upon delivery to the joint boards, like
By the boards.
is that it?
Do we want to impose any timeline expectations in here? To say that they'll be presented at the January meeting or something like that. I
think we got to crawl, walk, run.
Yeah.
I think we start with, do we agree that we want to do this? Can we agree that we should be doing it a lot earlier in the process? I think that'll be a step.
Lock you into a calendar that's not always possible if
Right.
a position comes up
Right.
at an unusual time.
Sure. Yep. But yeah, I think of the sequencing of work and sort of getting everybody to buy in on that is a sort of separate body of work. Okay, discipline, discharge of superintendent, all matters regarding the discipline, discharges. So we kind of use the same language here that we did in the hiring. Discussed within a joint meeting of the three boards. Such a meeting shall be called by any one board chair or any one board pursuant to board bylaws. I think that's really good language. Like, good. Discipline and discharge of executive. Prior to any dispute and or discharge, the superintendent shall bring the proposed action to a joint meeting of the three boards for advice and consent. The boards may also initiate recommendations for discipline and or discharge by holding a joint meeting of the three boards to advise the superintendent of their proposed actions. That would happen. It would be proposed that happened inside of an executive session. And if we're talking about if a direct report of the superintendent said, fantastic, no, you have to do this publicly, then that would be the case. Do we need to say that here? Okay.
Yeah, I think this language to me is somewhat compromised language that hopefully gets everybody on board, because it compromises a little bit the question of who should be dealing with reports to the superintendent.
Right. Yeah, which I think we start by saying it's the superintendent. And for those who say, no, we have the right to do whatever we want in that regard, we say, okay, well then you can initiate that, but
right.
You can't
do it outlet with guardrails.
Yeah, you got to have all three boards meeting together. And the point of that, again, is not that you're doing anything but advising the superintendent. Although it says advising the superintendent of their proposed actions.
We can requested actions.
Yeah, recommendations. Okay.
Yeah.
Recommendations. That's it. Okay. Okay. All matters regarding employees outside of the superintendent and executives reporting directly to the superintendent shall be addressed within the bounds of a reporting relationship only based on concrete and verifiable information. Okay. So then we come to these questions, the resolution of issues questions.
Best for last.
Or not at all.
Okay, I'm optimistic.
I think, I mean, certainly the recess and reconvene, that's always available to us. I mean, we can write it down, but I think that's not,
I think it's important to write that down. Tom.
Yeah. I just don't think it's controversial.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not controversial, but it's important to write that down.
Right.
Remind people, hey, hot tempers can cool down if you give them enough time.
So is it something like within the context of any meeting of the three boards? Chris, do you have thoughts?
No, but I do have a question before we get to the language, and I'm curious about the extent to which this might be a helpful thing to sort of get an opinion on. In the context of sort of cooling down and reconvening, one of the things that typically gets in the way of doing that is, well, my goodness, when are we going to get all of us back together? Look at calendars. How are we going to do this? It could be, and we have to notice 24 hours. So we can't just say we're coming back tomorrow at 7:30.
Right.
I wonder what the permissibility is of allowing for basically a motion to recess the meeting for 20 hours or something.
Yeah.
And keep the meeting open and come back on less than 24 hours notice is permissible.
Is that a call to FOIA?
It might be a call to the FOI commission, not because we're trying to hide something or try to work around the rules, but because we're trying to basically say the meeting is going to go for 30 hours now. We're just going to all go about our days for a day and come back.
Right.
It's a little cutesy, but I think it might make it easier for people to say, yes, let's recess and reconvene, because they'll feel like there's a greater certainty that it will come back to it.
Right.
Why hasn't that, I mean, that seems brilliant to me. Why it hasn't been done in the past, I don't understand.
Yeah,
I'm just an annoying proceduralist, so
I suspect. I suspect that while it may be within the letter, the FOIA commission would say, "Hold on a second, you're trying to skirt the sort of notice requirements," and I would think that pretty quickly they would seek to close that loophole. Right, recesses can't last longer than blah.
I mean, if you look at the legislature, to the extent that it is bound by FOI, they hold public hearings open for a day and everybody leaves regularly. Or they hold votes open for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and then come back 6 hours later and say, okay, has anybody who hasn't voted? All right, we're going to close the hearing now.
Huh.
But
interesting.
Of course, there are lots of exceptions to FOI for the legislature.
And a little bit, is that what we want to be like?
No, not necessarily, but that would be a great, valve release. On something.
Right. Well, I mean, I also think a little bit, when I think about recess and reconvene, I don't think about that as much. I think of we can see that we're dug in. Let's take a 20-minute break from this, which could include, let's go talk about some other stuff that is less controversial. Let's get that stuff done. And then let's come back to this and see if just that simple act has sort of shifted us a little bit in our seats. I'm not particularly comfortable with the idea of what it sounds like may have taken place in the past, which is hey, let's recess and then go have non-public
let's go lobby in the corner.
sidebars.
Yeah, no.
Right. And multiple ways of doing that. I mean, is it above board to say, 3 people from this board are going to go talk to 2 people from that board? Yeah, I guess so. But again, it doesn't seem right.
I mean, I would be comfortable even putting in here language that says that that's not okay.
Right. Right. So
Private lobbying of board members is impermissible.
Right.
I mean, you have to probably include a caucus exception but that's a whole different.
Right. Within the bounds of any joint meeting of the three boards. So I think this could be used to great effect, but only if we get better at recognizing when we're at an impasse.
Right.
Because today we seem to, I started tracking the time at which it was obvious, to me at least, that we're at an impasse, and then watching the time tick on. And it's oftentimes an hour past the time when it's like, no, we're clearly, we don't agree on this. And we just continue to litigate without any new discussion happening.
But you have to recognize, John, that sometimes people are at different frameworks, and when they recognize that in and of themselves, they don't think they're dug in.
Right.
They think the other person is dug in. So
Right.
that's why that hour,
Right.
it takes a really long time.
I would add to that, we were pretty dug in on some of the language in the DEI committee recently. And, we actually got more dug in, and by way of getting more dug in and focusing on it's this word, it's, these three words that, and then when, whether, Heather or Devin or others proposed, like, hold on a second, the important thing is the meaning of what we're trying to do here. Here is a way of saying that meaning in different words, and people got much more comfortable with it. And that was the ultimate digging in and wordsmithing. Like all of that, I would normally say, let's not do that. But I actually thought that was one of the better examples of how to sort of push ahead and do meaningful work to get, to come to an agreement. What do we say?
If you want to create a broad safety valve here, you could say that you could basically say that if any board moves to recess or in the discretion of the chair of the meeting, an impasse is declared, the board shall recess and reconvene. And then you're basically saying that the other two boards have to stand down if one of the boards says we need some time.
Mm-hmm. But
I think that option has actually worked in the past.
Mm-hmm. I worry about that being taken lightly, though.
In the sense?
It just becomes a pocket veto for certain issues.
Right.
That's the risk of being too flexible, because you also have to build in then a backstop, which is, it's not a postpone indefinitely. It's a recess with an expectation of coming back.
Right.
And the another sort of thing that on a scheduling piece that has me thinking about this motion to, recess question is, as a practical matter, if the boards meet on a Thursday at 7 p.m., because Reading's town clerk is closed on Friday,
right,
the next time we could meet is the following Tuesday. And if there's a holiday on a Monday, the next time we can meet is the following Wednesday.
Right.
So you might have an automatic 6-day wait just from a notice perspective.
Right. Which is
crazy.
That's crazy. I do wonder about, there was some guidance that I thought FOIA Commission had shared about, it's sort of your intent to post it. And if you're posting it on your own agency sites, that the town clerk can't be the limiting factor.
I'm of the view that if it's posted on the ER9 website on Friday, you can meet on Monday, even if the town clerk is closed.
That's right.
What I don't want to do is get into a situation where something that is sort of controversial or of significant meaning is decided at a meeting that is posted in that way.
Right.
And then we have to have a dispute about it.
And then reverse.
It just creates unnecessary ambiguity.
I think that the sort of typical FOIA Commission example of the sort of how that can go wrong is, I think, pretty easily remedied by boards saying, well, even if we are right, it doesn't hurt for us to put on these suspenders and just vote on it again inside.
Meet again and do it again. Right.
Exactly. Right. And And I would urge all boards to consider that, because like there's no harm. There's no harm in just, let's just say yes again, just in case in case we're not right that the way we did it before, because the sort of dire examples of other towns who have found themselves paying people 3 years back pay, like that's absurd. All you had to do was have another meeting like a week later. So
John, people are emotional.
Yeah.
I did not know about said dire examples.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's a case where I think a fire commissioner or a police officer was discharged in an illegally noticed meeting.
Right.
And then the litigation went on for several years, and ultimately they had to pay like 3 years of back pay.
Right. And literally, and people made complaints right away. It wasn't like nobody made any complaints. People made complaints and they just flatly refused.
You have to complain within 30 days.
Yeah.
It's a really short limitation.
Right. So that they would have been paying 30 days back pay instead of 3 years had they simply said, we disagree with you. We think what we did was proper, but we'll meet again anyways and do this same action inside of a properly noticed meeting. And, then their liability would have been 30 days.
Hubris.
Yep. So,
I mean, since typically when people think about recessing, they're talking about recessing for, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Do you want to provide any more details on the sort of up to X number of hours here? Because I mean, what we've been discussing is a departure from our typical practice.
Yeah, the sort of typical sort of framing or thinking about what a recess is.
And then I hate to say this, what are the decision rules for when you would take a 15-minute break versus a 24-hour break?
Right.
I think in the context of a joint meeting, I would be comfortable even fully granting the chair of the meeting discretion to call for a 15-minute recess at his or her discretion without having to go through 3 motions, 3 seconds, and 3 votes that could take almost the full time of the 15-minute recess.
Certainly for a 15-minute recess or even a 30-minute recess, I absolutely agree. And we've all had the benefit of doing many of these meetings on Zoom, right?
Right.
And Zoom does give you the ability, to sort of psychologically break from the meeting in a way that being in person does not.
Right.
So it is going to be all the more important when all these tri-board meetings are in person to have that mechanism. I think for people who are going to be coming back out of Zoom and not have it, solo
There's going to be
themselves.
There's going to be a level of meeting exhaustion that nobody is ready for.
Right.
We're back at the table.
Right. For good and for bad, because that level of meeting exhaustion often provokes tempers, in my opinion. So.
Right, and doesn't necessarily lead to the conclusion of the meeting at a time.
I do think you have to, so what we're trying to do here is structure a basically short breather and then a recess that really has people sleeping on it, so to speak.
2 levels of safety valve.
Without advice and consent of the 3 boards.
On his or her initiative. Yeah.
Do you want to say his or her or name the position?
Yes, please.
Chairs.
Thank you. We just say there.
Well, is it the board chair you're talking about making that decision?
Yes.
Okay. Are we also saying something about a longer recess?
We're gonna try. I hope.
I mean, you can, for right now, what you might say is that is build a structure around a recess that has a date certain to return. Because I think that's important to everybody's comfort level in doing it. And I think that's a little bit of what happened on Tuesday, or Wednesday morning, which was, yeah, we're not going to be able to bottom out on this until 4 o'clock in the morning. So let's all get some sleep and come back, but let's agree on when we're coming back.
And that would be with a vote of the 3 boards.
So there's levels of sort of nuance here. We're talking about a particular disputed point. So it's not really recessing at that point. It's saying,
right,
this is item 3 on the agenda. We're never going to get a resolution on this. Everybody's angry about it. Let's table this until next Tuesday. And in the meantime, move on to these other things. So really, it's kind of a motion to postpone definitely, I think, would be the motion under Roberts.
Yep. So if we said recess, recesses and tabling, something like that, right? It's like both of these under that.
Postponing, really.
Yeah. Postponing.
It's postponed to a certain time, I think, is the.
I think I like recess, postpone, and reconvene. Because you want the assumption to be that you're reconvening on the same issues.
Right. And, strictly from a Roberts perspective, a motion to postpone, you can move to postpone something indefinitely, or you can move to postpone something until a time or date certain, which is a debatable motion that's passed by a simple majority. A motion to recess would suspend the meeting in its entirety. I don't think is debatable, and is also, and doesn't require a return time, but is typically
right
implied. So you're saying sort of it's when there is an impasse, you can recess within the context of the meeting, or postpone to another meeting. Is really what we're going at.
Right.
So within the context of a meeting, you are recessing to regroup on it. Alternately, you can table the issue within the context of the meeting and come back to it. From John, your idea of let's talk about some less charged issues, and come back to it.
Topic, ... and then postpone. Okay. So it's recess, table. What I also like about this is it's levels.
Yes.
Right. So it's starting with a brief recess, then with let's just put this aside for now and talk about some other stuff and come back to this later. And that might actually be easier than a recess, but so maybe it's table, recess, postpone. Versus
I think it sort of depends. There's a lot that depends on the context of the meeting. And if it's 10 o'clock, the recess is going to be helpful no matter what.
Right. Within the bounds of any joint meeting of the 3 boards, chair joint meeting may call a brief recess of 15 minutes on the chair's initiative. Additionally, a topic, an agenda item.
Agenda item.
May be temporarily tabled. As I know this is terrible, but I'm just trying to get the basic stupid idea out of my head. I'm still recovering. I'm usually really, I mean, you give me a 2, 3 a.m., whatever. You know, I'm fine the next day. This has caused a cascade of issues.
It always depends on what follows sessions like that. If you had an easy day the next day, you're
Right.
fine. If you didn't, you're still recovering.
Right. I had a very interesting day the next day, important stuff the next day, and had to move stuff to Thursday, and then Thursday 3-hour drive into the office. Like, it's like, no.
3 hours. Oh my.
Yeah, it was nuts.
I think we can all agree that traffic got, like, everyone who can drive is driving at Fairfield.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Have you heard about roads? Have you heard?
Right.
And no one's on the train, right?
Yeah.
No one's riding the train.
Right. Yeah, that's actually the first explanation that helps me to understand part of what's driving that. That's right, is people aren't riding the train.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Additionally, an agenda item may be temporarily tabled.
Do you need a motion to table an item like this? So in accordance with Robert's rules?
Yeah.
Or some similar statement?
Yeah, I think so. Temporarily tabled in accordance.
I'm kind of, as we work through this, and in light of sort of the way that the meeting went on Tuesday, thinking about creating a separate stream here on sort of a procedural cheat sheet for everybody.
Yes.
So that we understand what your options are to get stuff done.
That's right.
Because technically under FOI, we're required to record all motions, who makes them, who seconds them, and how people vote. But a cute workaround to that is when you take things on unanimous consent, there's always no objection. So you're always recording the votes through their, sideways.
Right.
And so motions to table and things, absent objection, can be moved very, very quickly, as opposed to just taking votes on everything.
Right. Temporarily tabled, absent objection. Do we want to say that?
I mean, it's temporarily tabled on motion. You'd require a motion, and also the chair theoretically can be the movement, because these boards are small enough to allow the chair to make and second motions. So if the chair exercised that discretion, they could say, "I move to table this," and that can trigger that whole line of thing. But in this trilateral world, everything needs to happen in duplicate.
Maybe temporarily tabled upon motion in accordance with Robert's rules. And it's kind of redundant. Where everything we do is supposed to be under Robert's rules.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. When we table an item like that, do we want to say, okay, here's where we're putting it now in the new agenda, here's where we're going to cover it?
I don't think from a purely Robert's perspective, you move on to the next item on the agenda, and then somebody has to call to take it off of the table.
Okay. Do we want to say an agenda item may be temporarily tabled, and maybe called? Seems like it should be recalled. But
the motion is to remove it from the table, basically.
Okay.
Or to and bring it back for consideration. This gets sort of hyper technical.
Yeah. Temporarily removed from the table, and then later
removed from the table for consideration later within the meeting.
reintroduce for consideration later in the meeting?
Sure.
Something like that. Okay, and postponing. And I'm mindful we have 5 minutes here. Postponing.
So you can I would suggest that it's a motion to postpone until a date and time certain. I mean, in theory, all we're doing here is restating procedural tools that exist in the absence of this.
Right.
But that's honestly really helpful because I did not know they existed until I watched the process unfold. And if someone had told me that at the beginning, I think I certainly would have jumped in at points and said, how about? Really? I would have.
Yeah. Let's do this.
It's part of your onboarding of new board members.
That's right.
I mean, to a certain extent, your hands are tied behind your back if you don't know the tools that you have at your disposal.
That's right.
And a meeting is not the time to ask the questions that would
Nope.
clarify what you don't know.
Nope.
Right.
Too much, it's a subtext, right?
That's right. A motion to postpone an agenda item with a to a specific to
For a
a
time and date certain.
time and date certain.
Period, I guess.
Okay. Do we want to attach some kind of, these are the less severe versions and this is the most severe?
I think for clarity's sake, yes. I think you'll help people frame their thought processes. And going back to the deletion of Robert's rules, I think that you have to make clear for some people that the chair can only just sort of summarily decide as to option one.
Mhm.
And so some level of clarifying language, I know that because I'm sitting in this meeting with you all, but somebody reading this, kicking the can down the road might think that
Right.
the chair is being given a little bit more discretion than we're giving the chair.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the chair obviously can invite those tools or even make those motions, but doesn't have the sole discretion to invoke those rules.
Right. I think for the purposes of when this goes to the larger group, I think you're going to have to make that clear because otherwise it looks like we're giving the chair sort of a superpower. No superpowers for the chair. That's fine.
When there's an impasse, really. Because what you don't want to do is suggest that we're just going to keep postponing until we pass whatever it is somebody wants to pass, because the
Right.
resolution can be it fails, and that is
Right.
a perfectly reasonable resolution.
Yep. Could we say when an agenda item something about is unlikely to be resolved?
When the boards are at an impasse over an agenda item. Because really this is impliedly getting at a two boards think one thing, one board thinks another situation.
Right. Or one board thinks one thing and two boards think another thing. It's all about perspective.
Well, yes, and it's all really about persuasion.
Yeah. With the approval of the boards, when the boards are at an impasse over an agenda item, a motion.
I'm gonna have to go, you guys. I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Understood. So let's leave it there. Public comment. No members of the public being present. Committee member comment.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hearing only that. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Maureen. And Chris, seconds, and we are adjourned at 10:01 a.m.
See you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.